Hi Mayank.
Hi Praja.
Good morning. And thanks for joining us for this insightful journey about yoga and your journey with yoga and your life in Dubai. So can you just talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been here for about 22 years in Dubai, so this is sort of home for us. Both kids were born here and brought up here. From an intersection of yoga, I was practicing for the last 25-30 years, but around 17 years back I decided to make it a little bit more serious, so I went and attended a teacher's training course in Kerala with Shivananda Ashrams. So that was a 1-month residential course, and once I came back I started teaching. So for me that was sort of the turning point where yoga became integral to my life. I opened up a non-profit entity called Yoga Smoothie, and we support 3 children's shelters, one in Africa, one in Nepal, one in India. That became the way I wanted to frame yoga in my life. Teach once a week, and through yoga support charities that I was working with. So in yoga we have a term called Sovitaa. It's one of the integral aspects for being a yoga teacher, that you need to continue your own self-study. It's what yoga means to me. Abhyasa, which is practice, Swadhyaya, which is self-study, and Seva, which is doing karma yoga, which is supporting somebody else, bringing it back into life, somebody else.
Oh, that's an excellent amalgamation of all those aspects together. So what type of yoga do you teach?
I'm an alumnus of Shivananda Yoga, but I bring in elements of Iyengar Yoga also because I like the alignment centricity of Iyengar Yoga, and I like the holistic side of Shivananda because Shivananda really focuses on the chakras and how body is made up of energy, meridian, shields. So for me, that sort of more esoteric side of yoga I take from Shivananda, and the more physical and alignment side I take from Iyengar and marry them together. For most people that still would fall under the umbrella of Hatha Yoga.
Hatha Yoga. Feel anyone can really enjoy and gain from yoga, or is it just a way of life? Like when you think of yoga, many people just associate it with stretching or with meditation or an art of breathing.
So yoga is definitely a way of life. There are limbs of yoga, and those could be meditation, could be pranayama, which is breathing, could be asana, which is of course the physical poses and so on. But yoga is far more than all of that. Everybody comes to it for your hamstrings, but you stay for your soul. So you come to stretch, but eventually you realize that there's so much more depth in yoga. To me, yoga is an ocean. So some of us might prefer to just walk along the shore and never dip our toes in. Some of us will dip our toes in. Some of us will probably swim along the shoreline, and some of us will go deeper. So it doesn't matter to yoga which part of it you embrace, but it is always there, available to everybody to use. And I think everybody can do it as per their comfort, as per their range, as per what speaks to them, what resonates with them. So I think it's available for all. It's a way of life, and I think you might come in just for the initial physical part, but you'll stay in for the spiritual.
What has yoga done for you as a person?
I think it makes you more balanced as a person, and that mat, that few square foot of space becomes your laboratory. It's a space where both you're moving your thoughts and your body, and the more you become one with the mat in a sense, the more you start taking lessons from the mat back into life on how to remain detached emotionally sometimes from a situation, not take it personally, how to see it from a third person point of view, how to remain equanimous in a situation, neither getting overly affected by either pleasure or pain. So I think it's just about that balance that yoga brings in, which is what for me I think is what holds center stage from a yoga point of view.
So how can yoga help people like me who's suffering from a condition like sciatica? What are your thoughts on rehab and yoga?
They say you're as young as your spine and as strong as your back. And really yoga's focus is on the spine and the back from a musculoskeletal point of view. So any disorder which affect the muscles of the skeletal system, yoga can really help, because the stretching, the expanding, the contracting, the twisting, the turning, it all sort of brings energy and life back into our muscles, our organs, and our skeletal system. As well, yoga is probably the only well-being form that truly addresses the endocrine system, because when you start doing the headstand or the shoulder stands, you are taking care of the pituitary, the pineal gland, the thyroid gland, and so on. And we have chakras which mirror those. Yoga is probably one of the most complete forms of well-being, and the more deeper you go, the more you can start understanding how it affects you at every level, including the cellular level to the spiritual level.
Could yoga, if not done rightly, cause any sort of severe injuries?
Any form of physical activity can cause injury. As long as you're using your common sense, body intelligence, muscle memory, and not going beyond your own comfort or range, I think you're safe. But the minute you become over ambitious or impatient and try and force things or speed things up is when you risk injury in any physical activity. In yoga, especially, injuries happen in the transition or coming into a pose or moving out of a pose. It's normally not in the pose that the injury happens. When you're trying to enter a pose and you stretch beyond what you're capable of, or when you're trying to exit a pose and you sort of hurry out of the pose without linking it to the breath, that's when injuries happen. But otherwise, yoga is one of the non-impact activities, so it becomes far safer than some other physical activities, and as long as you're doing it with awareness, with consciousness, I think it's completely safe.
What are the differences between yoga and Pilates? Because now there's this general consensus talking about Pilates being safer and stronger for your core, more effective for your core versus yoga. So what are your thoughts on that?
Pilates is a great activity, and obviously it focuses on the core, and it also brings awareness to, again, the musculoskeletal system. But in some ways that's where Pilates' strength lies and finishes, whereas yoga brings that and far more. In yoga, you would start understanding about the energy meridian, the nadis. We have 72,000 nadis, and there are 3 that we focus on mainly. We would start understanding the chakras, which are the energy centers. You go beyond the physicality in yoga, which you don't in Pilates. Besides that, inversions are really the heart of yoga, and Pilates doesn't have any inversions. It doesn't have a headstand or a shoulder stand. Yes, in some of the machines that they have, you do invert yourself to some extent, but you're inverting with the help of machines, and you're not inverting with the help of the core or the spine in that sense. So I think there's where the limitation of Pilates is, that it focuses on the core, the spine, and it's great from a posture point of view and from that point of view. But beyond that, when you want to go deeper into a subject, the philosophy side of it, the breathing side of it, the whole cellular level side of it, then if you want that more, then Pilates probably finishes at a level where you suddenly start wanting to explore more. And that's where people gravitate again back into yoga.
Okay, so talking about inversions, why do you think we need it?
Krishnamacharya and Shivananda, 2 of the most important teachers of the last century in yoga, both said if you need to do just 3 poses in a day, there should be the headstand, the shoulder stand, and the forward bend. So that's sort of the importance they placed on it. Shivananda went as far as saying that you just need 3 asanas for good health, and these are the 3 ones: the headstand, shoulder stand, and the forward bend. And the headstand is called the king of the asanas, because it sort of turns you against gravity, so one helps your heart take a rest because it doesn't need to pump as hard now to make blood flow. Plus it nourishes the brain, and it also brings a lot of your digestive issues and so on. It alleviates them because it brings the organs back to their normal state of being. From a esoteric or a spiritual point of view, we say that the headstand brings the yang energy, so the masculine energy, to the fore. Therefore you need to balance it with the yin energy, and the shoulder stand does that. The shoulder stand is called the queen of the asanas. So the headstand focuses on the pituitary, which is the master gland from endocrine system, and then the shoulder stand focuses on the thyroid gland, which is where most of us seem to have issues nowadays, especially if you're a woman. You start ending up with thyroid issues. So whole neck lock which the shoulder stand forms, and then you do a counter pose called the fish. So that really opens up the throat chakra, the Vishuddha chakra, where we hold our emotions, which is another issue these days, and it also activates the thyroid gland. So from both those point of view, the shoulder stand again becomes a very, very important pose or an asana, because while the master gland the pituitary can tell the body what to do, but the thyroid is where the rest of the messaging passes out of. So we've actually got 2 axes, the HPA axis and the HPT axis, which is basically the hypothalamus, pituitary, and thyroid, and then the other is the adrenal gland. So these 2 axes speak to each other. So none of these endocrine systems work in isolation. These are all feedback mechanisms and loops, negative feedback and positive feedback mechanisms which work with each other. So these 2 HPA axes and HPT axes, which are really responsible for our internal health, are managed through the shoulder stand and the headstand. And then finally you go into the forward bend, because that's where you again bring the rest back to the body, and you bring the organs back to their normal state where they are. So that sort of finishes it. So it's called the divine tune. So that's what we call these 3 asanas together. Coming
back to sciatica, could you talk a bit more about the asanas that you reckon would heal the condition?
Sciatic nerve is the longest nerve that we have and one of the thickest. So any issues with sciatica can come up in various different parts of the limbs or the lower back for people. And that's really where yoga scores, because you could have sciatica because of either a herniated disc, a bulging disc, or because the nerve is compressed in the hip muscles, which are really strong, powerful muscles. So yoga really opens out these muscles, this lower back spasms that could be compressing the nerve. And if it's a disc issue, then again you have poses in yoga which can bring the herniated disc back into its original state of being. So from that point of view, that's how yoga helps. And the poses that in particular help are normally the supine poses or the prone poses. So supine being lying down on your spine and prone being on your stomach. So if it's a bulging disc, then you do more prone, because then you're compressing the spine back. And if it's one of the hip ones, then you do a lot of more hip stretches, but while lying down, so that your back is protected. Sometimes you could do a hamstring stretch when you're standing and you do a forward fold bend, but that can aggravate sciatica sometimes, because you're not in a neutral position for the spine. So that's why the supine series are probably the best for sciatica, and if done right, they can completely cure your back.
Talking about yoga, Smoothie, how can one access your the work that you've done or the kind of videos you've put together? Are you available on social media?
Yeah, so you could visit my website yogasmriti.com, And there's enough information there from my blogs to the giving back page on what we've been doing and so on. I teach only online now, teach via Instagram, and people could follow me on mayank.yoga, and all the classes are stored, are archived. So I have a section of 30-minute classes, I have a section of 45-minute classes, and I have a section of 60-minute classes. So it addresses everybody's needs from that point of view.